Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we're going to be moving right along with our 62 GMC build by kicking off the frame swap. I've got our donor in the shop right now. It's a 74 C10 short bed. I just uploaded a video on this thing of getting it running because I wanted to see, if we had a good usable powertrain to sell to try to recoup some of the money on buying the parts truck, and it was a lot of fun. That video link can be found in the description box below, and if you'd like a refresher on the series and the direction of the build as a whole, I've also got the build playlist down in the description so you guys can check that out. But today is going to be a lot of disassembly, breaking things down, moving things in and out of the shop. By the end of this video, I want to have the body completely stripped off of this chassis. I want to have the cab taken off of the 62 frame and at least kind of mock them up together. So we should be able to get a pretty cool visual by the end of the video. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco for sponsoring this build. It's an honor to be able to work with them with what I believe is going to be a really unique build at the end of the day. We're basically taking the best elements of two old GM vehicles that were destined for the scrap heap and elevating our 62 GMC to a proper Restomod status. One that's dependable, fun to drive, and of course, easily serviceable. So in doing that, we're going to be repurposing as many things as we can repurpose and replacing whatever needs to be replaced with GM Genuine Parts that are all still readily available through acdelco.com. So if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so and make sure that notification bell is turned on because we've got a lot of fun content planned, and I hope you guys will join us on the journey. I mentioned in the last video that I wanted to try to pull some casting numbers off of this motor so we can see what we actually have. It ended up being a bit more interesting though. So the block is a 350 block from a late 80s F-body, so like a Camaro. The heads are 283 Power Pack heads. So without knowing anything else about the motor, I don't know what cam is in it, I don't know if the heads have been ported. More than likely it's a higher compression build, which is pretty cool. It's definitely a rowdy sounding setup, and I'm sure in its heyday this truck was an absolute blast. Since the last video, I did some more tweaking to the carburetor and whatnot and got this thing running so good. So before we get into the teardown, let's fire it up one more time and get some sound clips. Like I said, this thing runs great. It's smooth, has pretty good throttle response, and all it took to get it running was throwing a new AC Delco starter on there, doing a little bit of tweaking, some fresh gas, and that's really about it. You wouldn't think it would run as good as it does considering how it looks, but hey, I'm not complaining. So now let's dive into what I believe is always the most fun part of a new build, the teardown. Considering how rotten the truck's body is, I'm amazed the frame is this clean. This is going to be the perfect foundation for the 62. I'm just about finished up with this truck for the meantime, but we got to do a little bit of back and forth to get the bed and the cab out of here, and then we can move on to stripping down the 62. Now this is what I've been looking forward to. The whole creative process of figuring out how to mount the 62 cab onto the 74 C10 frame. And in case anybody was wondering, I'm not going to be using this bed. This is a long bed step side. I'm still going to have it a step side, but I'm going to be building a new short bed for it. The main reason I wanted to do the frame swap is that it would give me a much better platform to build the Restomod out of versus what I have right here. With the 62, the front suspension is pretty antiquated. There aren't any coil springs in front. You've got torsion bars even though this is a two-wheel drive truck. There's also manual brakes, four-wheel drum brakes, and manual steering. The frame and cross members were set up for the original 305 cubic inch GMC V6 and a 4-speed Muncie transmission. I mean, this thing was pretty stout back in the day. GMC trucks in general were made to do serious work, but unfortunately this suspension design is just not as easy to live with nowadays when it comes to serviceable components. It would take a whole lot of work and parts changing to get this truck up to where the 74 already is. Like I said, the main reason I'm building the truck this way is to have something that's very easy to live with, which is not something that you can say too often about a classic vehicle. Even one that's been restored, and especially so if it's been restored to original spec. I'll be able to pretty much get anything and everything I need regardless if it's brakes, steering, suspension components, or even something relating to the engine or transmission that I'll be swapping into this truck. Either through acdelco.com, a local GM dealer, or a GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco distributor. Throughout the series, I'll have links down in the description box below to list the specific parts that I'm using, so you can go to acdelco.com and check all of that out, or put your vehicle in there to see what parts they offer for it. This is going to be awesome for the long term because I'm incorporating parts that are backed by General Motors, and because of that, I can be sure that I'll be setting up this project for success. I'll be able to daily drive this or take it on a long trip and not worry about it. The 74 chassis is already set up pretty good. It's got power steering and power brakes with a coil-sprung front suspension. The brakes are discs in front and drums in the rear, and this particular truck was actually equipped with the optional heavy-duty brake package, which had larger brakes in the front and the rear. It's also already set up for a small block Chevy, which makes it easily adaptable over to an LS, so this is going to be sweet. Item on my list of things to figure out is going to be the back section of the cab where it sits on the frame. The 74 frame is shaped a bit differently than the 62. The area where the 62's cab bolted up was completely flat, and then you had a set of risers where the bed started and then the frame kicked up for the rest of the bed. This frame, however, actually kicks up underneath the cab, and the whole back section right here is pretty much flat. So what's basically happening right now is that the cab of the 62 is sitting down sooner than it needs to. So I might actually have to make some reliefs in the floor for it to actually sit down over the frame a little bit, because right now if I try to lay it down all the way, the front of the cab dives forward. If we were doing some kind of four-wheel drive build and wanted to give the truck a lifted stance, this wouldn't be a big deal at all. You would just factor it into the overall lift that you're wanting to do for the truck. But obviously that's not what we're doing right here, so we gotta get a little creative. Obviously this wasn't gonna be a direct bolt-on. There's gonna have to be things to be figured out. But in the grand scheme of things, the overall fitment of everything and where it all lines up seems pretty good. We'll go to the front in just a second. The back of the 62 cab is actually partially sitting on the rear 74 cab mounts. All in all, I like it so far. The front cab mounts are pretty different between the 74 and the 62. The 74 is a little more inboard, the 62 mounted in that flat spot right there. I may actually end up taking the cab mounts off of the 62's frame to maybe use as a guide or a template, so to speak, for you know, getting some custom body mounts made. I don't have the cab and the frame 100% centered with each other. It's really close, but you know, it's not perfect. But this gives us a really good idea on where things are going to lie at the end of the day. The motor looks awesome sitting there. There's good clearance with the valve covers and whatnot. If you weren't paying that close attention, you would almost think this is, you know, an original type setup. I mean, check out the steering shaft. It's really close. This is the 62 steering shaft. I've got the 74's, you know, whole column deal on there because it was really hard to move this otherwise without having a means to steer it. But 74 power steering gearbox, I mean, I haven't tried to hook this up yet, but it's really close. With all of this out of the way, the next step of the build is going to be just pulling the cab back up, leaving the frame in here and doing a lot of measuring and test fitting. I want to make 100% sure what modifications I'm going to need to make to the floor, and then I can start making some custom cab mounts. Well everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please don't forget to leave a like down below because it really helps the videos a lot. And if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so because of course we've got a whole lot more content where that came from. Once again, a big thanks to GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco for sponsoring the series. If you need any parts for your ride, definitely check them out down in the description box below. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.